right, so in my last video about immigration, I made a comment during the middle about how I felt like there was no more virtuous people in the U.S., right? Like, I didn't really think people were, you could say hard work is a virtue. I said I don't really feel like that's there. So I wanted to make a video to follow up on that. I've titled this presentation "The Citizen: The Key to Many Problems the World Faces." Right? So what I want to start with is simply just what I mean by virtuous, right? I touched on virtue in the last video. I think like I said, I was specifically talking about somebody hardworking there. Using maybe like a classical version of virtue, if you want to say it, it'd be like a holistic view of somebody. If you're virtuous, you're a virtuous person because all of your decisions, it's a very holistic thing. All of your decisions are made not on your emotion, but on what is best, right? So, and generally that's the mean between two extremes. So, say you were courageous, okay? Too courageous might mean you go running out into the crowd by yourself, or I know there's another famous example of a woman's getting robbed, and you go out to help her, but you can't take on the two dudes, right? So you go run out there, and now you're both in trouble because you're both captured because the two dudes were bigger than you, okay? Or you could be too scared, right? Too cowardly, where even if it was two dudes you knew you could take on and take them down, you don't do anything. Or you don't call the cop, like maybe calling the cop. See it, but it's a scale, right? So it's about making the proper decision in the moment, separate from your emotions, right? And oftentimes it's unselfish to do that, right? So even if you knew you could take the two guys on, you knew you might get hurt, right? And so you might not want to do it. But logically that's the best move, right? Not everybody, when they say virtue, is probably talking about that. They're just talking about a good thing. But I'm really kind of going off Aristotle when I say that. That's Aristotle saying that would be the good thing. But just in general, it's, virtue is a good thing, and a virtuous person does good things and is made up of good, good things they do. So I thought, what better example than George Washington, man? We had just got out of a situation where we were unhappy about, the king. We didn't really want a king. We kind of got out of that. But some people were wanting a king again. And, George Washington already served 2 terms, right? And they wanted him to serve another one. And he said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And he laid it down. And yeah, that story probably gets romanticized a lot, I'm pretty sure he owned a farm, so it's not like he was returning to poverty. I mean, he was making money. Pretty sure he owned slaves too. So, I mean, he was a fairly wealthy guy, probably, So it's not like he was going back, he was like laying down power to go live in a box or anything like that. But he laid down power. And so, if you were to look at it like this, virtuous, he made the best practical call regardless of what he wanted. Okay? Or you could even say if he wasn't enjoying staying in power, he still stayed in power because maybe he felt like that was the best decision. But what I'm trying to get at here is him laying down power, very unselfish move, right? Very okay. This is what needs to be done. This is what's best. So when he did that, though, he actually had a farewell address that he addressed to the people of the United States, warning them of some things he thought might be a big issue and whatnot. So a couple of things, I wrote them down here. Disunity, right? He was talking about disunity. He has a famous quote about, the name of an American should be what you hold more than any other name that you give somebody within the country, unifying. We've all been through this battle, and we all have a lot of the same customs and cultures, which I know I just said in my last video, I felt like that's not what made an American American. He also mentioned like governmental principles. So that is what I was mentioning. But yeah, he was, especially in these early days, everybody in the States was Christian. Everybody. So especially in these days, yeah, everybody acted the same, right? So he's saying, no, you're all American. We're all united together. Don't let disunity happen. Another thing he warned about was entangling alliances with foreign powers, foreign nations, right? So getting involved. He talks a lot about Europe, right? I mean, that was a lot of the other big powers during that time. Talks about getting involved with European affairs and things that don't concern America. Like, get out of that. Stay out of that. He warned about dangers of parties and the spirit of party, right? That could cause division and corruption and just things that are opposed to the Republican government of the United States. It's saying, no, stay away from that. Stay away from this disunity that can be caused by parties and their spirit and this tribalism almost. Because he says that the spirit of these parties and these factions and these groups is natural to men, right? So that could almost say is like tribalism. He's saying, avoid that. Avoid the dangers of parties getting too separated on and too divided on specific, territorial grounds. Just in general disunity through parties. And he's also just kind of tying this all together with the fact that it's all addressed to the citizens of the United States. So that's what's important. That's what I want to bring out about this, is that when he is addressing these warnings, he's saying to the United States. So imagine if you went to Congress right now and you were like, okay, Congress, say you went to some committee, right? You were like, hey, I want to warn you against these problems, right? I want to warn you of disunity, of entangling alliances, of parties. You said all that. You would say that to them because you knew they had power to fix it, right? You wouldn't just warn somebody about something if they didn't have the power to fix it. Like, do you know what I mean? He was warning in a way. I guess you could, right? But the way he's warning and the way he's talking about it is if as the citizens can take action to defend against it, right? And he even says so in one quote, talking about the spirit of party, like I was talking about earlier, of the bad things it can cause. He even says this. He says, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it, right? So he's addressing this to the people in these warnings as if, as a wise people, we can do something to restrain these problems that he's warning us about. But it's interesting, though, that he says a wise people. A wise people. And I want to build on that more with John Adams, right? John Adams came right after George Washington, the second president of the United States. He says in this quote specifically, he's talking about how we should raise our kids. And I'll get to that quote in a second. But what John Adams felt like was, in order for republics to work, the people needed to be virtuous. The people needed to have a sense of civic virtue, which specifically is being able to make the best decisions and put the state above yourself, your country above yourself, your fellow people above yourself, to keep the state running. And that's important because in a republic, the people have power to elect leaders to government, right? And that's why George Washington, in the quote before, was saying a wise people, because that's how people have responsibility, and that's how people are actually able to prevent those things George Washington was talking about, is by voting, getting involved politically, right? Getting your voice heard. That's how people can get involved and prevent those things. And John Adams knew that. John Adams felt like the United States, if it was going to work, needed a virtuous people. And he was saying in like 1776, he was saying he felt like they weren't virtuous enough. I didn't put the quote on here, but there's a quote where he's literally saying, I don't think we can make it as a republic. He was saying that about people in the Revolutionary period, that he felt like, nah, we didn't have it in us to become a nation, right? We didn't have it in us to become a republic because we weren't virtuous enough. And he said people were driven by too much profit and all this different things. And he was saying that in 1776, especially about profit. I mean, today, are you serious? People are way more driven by profit today than back then. I would have to imagine, all right? I mean, I don't think I need a statistic to back that up. I mean, it's got to be true. So he was already saying that back then. Imagine now. But he really made a point to say that he thought the key was in the people and in their virtue. So what he says in this quote is he's talking about raising up children to make them virtuous, right? To make them somebody that can build up the republic and can keep the republic strong. So look at what he says here. It should be your care, therefore, and mine, to elevate the minds of our children and exalt their courage, to accelerate and animate their industry and activity, to excite in them a habitual contempt of meanness, abhorrence of injustice and inhumanity, and an ambition to excel in every capacity, faculty, and virtue. If we suffer their minds to grovel and creep in infancy, they will grovel all their lives. So this was important to him. What he's saying here was important to him, not just because, yes, you want to have your kids be good people, but also because, like I had just said with this context, this is how the republic is going to live, is if we raise our kids like this. And he's not just talking about civic virtue here. I mean, animate their industry and activity. These are all just, in general, good things. And we'll touch on that later. But these are all, your John Adams is saying, build up these kids and make them great humans. He's saying start at the human level. It's not all about government, right? That's what I wanted you to take from this quote. And what I take from this quote is, it's not all about the systems of government. Even though the people are part of the government, it's not all about the Congress and the president and the bureaucracy. It's not all about that. It's also about the people at the root level, about education, about building people stronger and having greater sense of moral education too, which is very important because John Adams, another quote he says, probably way more famous than the last one, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. See, what does he finish that off with there? To the government of any other. So he's saying that our Constitution is not able to govern people except if they are moral and religious. Why is that? Because you rely on people that are able to control themselves. Okay, what did we talk about in the beginning? We talked about virtue, the mean between two things, and about how oftentimes that's against your emotions, right? You want to be super angry in a moment, you have to control yourself. That's, virtue. Well, what he's saying here is like, we need a moral and religious people for our Constitution to govern. And why is that? What do morality and religion both do? They control us, okay? I'm not going to get super angry at that person because I'm moral. Or, Christ says not to repay people the evil they've done to me, right? Like, I'm not going to, punch this dude in the face. You know what I mean? So it's restricting your emotions. And John Adams is saying that's what this Constitution was made for. And it makes sense, right? With the amount of liberty we're given and with the amount of control that we have in our government that we just don't realize ever and don't exercise, yeah, we need pretty self-contained people that know how to govern themselves. And that's what moral and religious people do. They can govern themselves and control themselves well, right? So I mentioned this, all throughout, but this is all important because in a Republican government, citizens are rulers, plain and simple, right? Where we have a seat at the table. You've got the president there, you've got Congress there. We got a chair there too. With the judicial branch, they got a chair there too. So do we. But here's the thing. We got 3 different butts taking up each section of our chair and we're nowhere to be found. We got to pull that chair back and sit down in that chair because we're at that table too. We're part of the balance of powers. We have a role in that, right? And we can only realize that if we're educated about the world around us, just like Congress would, right? I said at the beginning, if you were George Washington, or if you were saying what George Washington was saying, right? Hey, we need to be careful of these things. We need to watch out for disunity and entangling treaties abroad. You'd be presenting that and educating somebody to make a decision, right? Just like as you see people go before committees in Congress today. They say, hey, X, Y, and Z is like this. We need to do this, that. I recommend this, that, whatever. They're recommending it to somebody who's going to make a decision. Citizens can make decisions. We can make decisions on who to vote. And likewise, the people that we vote in will make those decisions. So if we are actually educated in, say, like, I don't know, there's controversy about if we should have went into Afghanistan. Maybe more people, if they knew about that, or if more people knew about Iraq, like if more people knew about what was going on in Israel, will we still support? You know what I mean? Education's important because we're effectively sending the people that are going to make the decisions to DC on our behalf. That's how it's supposed to work, right? So if we're not educated and we're rather taking their word for it, or we're just kind of going with it and we don't ever think about it, then we're effectively making those calls because we're sending those people into office, right? So the main thing we need to do is focus on education. That's why I put a picture of the school here. It's a pretty cool picture. It's like nice and old. It's kind of, reminiscent. It makes you think of some, good times or whatever. But, education, that's the most important thing, right? Just like John Adams was saying about kids, getting these kids educated, not only the kids, but ourselves as well, right? John Adams wasn't talking about that. I'm talking about it though. Educate ourselves, get ourselves up to date, expose ourselves to different cultures in the world around us, right? Morality, virtue, things that govern ourselves, things that make us make the call. When we make the call, we got to make the call that is best. Not what we want, but what's best, right? And so we're submitting ourselves to what is best and what is good. For me as a Christian, that mainly is what Christ says. But it also bases off of that into things that maybe Christ doesn't talk about, but I know that this is based on these principles. This is how I should act, right? That's religion, because I'm submitting myself to something else and not just doing what I want, right? I'm restricting myself. That's what we need. We need education on that. We need to teach kids that. And furthermore, just like John Adams is talking about, getting these kids in industry and everything like that, I feel like we shouldn't just be educating our kids just because we need them to make decisions and we want to make them virtuous. We should just be creating the literal best humans possible. Because if our government is so much about the people, then why are an absurd number of our people obese? Why are absurd number of our people, not as educated as they should be? Why are they as poor as they are? Why are they not as financially literate as they should be, right? If it's all about the people, and we want to be educated and make the best decisions, we just need to be the ultimate people. We need to be good, great people. We need to be good people. Good in the sense, not like morally, but of spectacular. We need to become the best version of ourselves we can be in order to properly fulfill our role as the people in this republic, in my opinion. But nonetheless, even if none of that's true, we need to be educated enough to make calls, make decisions. And we need to make those decisions that are the best for the state, right? And more than education, too, especially right now, we got to take political action, man. I hate this stat because in 2021, Congress had an approval rating of 31%, which compared to the other years was kind of high, but that's horrible. That's low. And no matter what the number is, look at the difference from the approval rating to the re-election rate. 95% re-election rate the previous year. That's insane. It's insane. That's insane. That's crazy. You could say that's for a bunch of different reasons. Maybe we're not giving people enough choices in primaries. Or maybe it's because, what I would think, people just don't do their research enough and they're just okay with it. Just, alright, yeah. Going to the primaries, voting for the primaries. Congress sucks. But I'm just, going to the primary. Yeah, I don't go to the primaries. I just vote for the Republican or Democrat. No, bro. Demand more people. Get politically active. Get loud. Demand something, because that is absurd. Absurd. Like I said, we're a check and balance. So these people that have been in, Congress since, I don't know, right after Jesus ascended into heaven, man, we're a check and balance on that. And we got to do our job. Because look, we have to, it's not even about just because, hey, if you don't want these people to get reelected, you need to go vote. It's also about the fact that that's wrong. That's wrong. That's not how it's supposed to be, man. We're not supposed to have people ingrained in power like that. We're not. So when we don't do our job as citizens, that's in our Constitution, that we're submitted to, right? George Washington even said that in his farewell address, that, whenever we make and we vote on different additions to and amendments to the Constitution, it's presupposed that we will follow the Constitution, right? And so we need to follow our duty to vote and make sure these people don't have power like that, unless they really are good. But clearly by a 95% re-election rate, we don't think they're good. You know what I mean? So they're not good, but we gotta get them out. Get them out. Vote. And not even just vote. Get loud, get active, get politically, get in it, right? Oh, and this is what I was saying at the end of the last video, man. It's just like we have such an opportunity, man. Like with our Constitution, with our history, with this nation, right? It's always been about opportunity. It's always been about what we have and what we can do, right? And we didn't always do it the right way. Yeah, sure, we bought Native American land sometimes. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we killed them. And we enslaved a lot of people. And that's bad. But what made all those things, what made it possible for us to try to correct those reasons, some people say we haven't yet. I would say probably we're still working on a lot of that. But we were able to correct that through the basic principle that all men are created equal. Right? You know what I mean? That's a principle that Americans hold. And we're able to fix our mistakes and grow and do amazing things through that. But it all starts with the people, and it all starts with how we feel about our country, if we actually care about bettering our country, and if we recognize the opportunity that we have each and every day to build something special. Not just in our lives, right? I'm not talking about building your career. No. I'm talking about being a part of something amazing, about building a country. We talk about ancient Babylon, right? That was a country way back, nation way back, way long ago. Okay? In thousands of years from now, the U.S. will be talked about as a country like that. Because the U.S. will not be around maybe it will. Some countries are. I don't know. Probably won't. Say like 3,000 years. We'll say 3,000. We're going to be talked about in archaeological terms, just like them. But you can be a part of that. You can be a part of that nation that was. Right? And you can give your kids a better future through that nation. And you can have the opportunity to build that nation. Because, listen, you have a seat at the table. Right? You have a seat at the table. You can make those calls that make that nation beautiful. Right? So go out there, tap in. Like JFK said, do something for your country.